Hey everyone, this is Marissa Gifford, and I wanted to take a couple of minutes to show you how I would edit an image from start to finish. So I recently was able to go to Europe for a few weeks, and this is one of my favorite pictures that I took there. This is the Plaza de España in Seville, Spain. So I love this image. I love the flag flying up here in the corner. I love the lines of the columns and the curve of the building here. And I wanted to show you how I would how I would approach this image. It was a bit of a cloudy day. It was, the colors aren't great. The light's not, it's really soft, so I feel like this image needed a little bit of love and oomph to really make it shine. So I'm going to show you how I would take it from here, which is this is directly straight out of camera. I opened it in ACR. I didn't make any tweaks to it, and then I just opened it straight into Photoshop here. So really, this is from scratch. So this is my straight out of camera shot, and this, oops. And this is my final edit here. And I'm going to show you how I went there starting from the beginning. So let me zoom back in here a little bit. All right, so the first thing I did is I'm going to add a little contrast here. And my favorite way to do this is with either levels or a curves layer. It doesn't really matter. All I'm going to do is I'm going to change the blend mode to soft light. And that is pretty harsh right there. So I am, just renaming it so I can keep all my layers straight here. I'm going to take this down to about half and see how I like that. And I like what that's done, maybe around 45%. I like what that's done everywhere except right here, which was already kind of dark, and so we're losing some detail in there, and maybe around here I'm not a huge fan of it. So I'm going to leave it at that opacity, and with my layer mask selected, I'm going to select my black brush over here, set it to 100%, and I'm just going to brush that off this entire area. I don't want any of that ceiling having that extra contrast and darkness on it. It doesn't need it. So when you hit the back or forward slash key, I can't ever keep those straight. Backslash, forward slash, the one right above the return button. You can see your masking and where you've made your adjustments. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean that up just a little bit. I'm a little bit OCD about things like this. So, actually that doesn't really matter right there. And then hit it again and it disappears. So that's one way that you can keep track of where you're making your edits. And it looks like I missed a spot there. And I definitely want to retain all this detail here because there's not very much to begin with because it was really shaded and dark. So my next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give this even a little bit more contrast and a little bit of toning. And my favorite way to do this is with a curves layer. Again, I'm going to set this one to soft light. So soft light is going to add more contrast, but it also makes the toning much more subtle. So this one I just set to 20%. If I had this in my normal blend mode, I'll show you the difference when I make my toning adjustments. It just is much more subtle this way in this blend mode, so I like it. With my red, I'm just going to select this, I don't even know what it's called, click and drag to modify the curve. It's like the pointer. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to increase the red. That's going to give it some more warmth there. I'm going to decrease the green by adding some magenta. And I'm going to decrease the blue, which will add some yellow. So you can see when I toggle this on and off, it's subtle, but it makes it just a little bit richer and warmer, and it kind of helps combat that grayness that we had that day. So I'm going to leave that one alone, even though it is affecting the ceiling here. We're going to fix that in a minute. So don't you worry. So I'm going to name that one toning. Oh, and I said I would show you. So this is what it would look like in normal mode. And it's, well, at 20%, it's not going to be, I guess, a big deal. But once you take it higher, it's just, sometimes it's a little bit hazier of a tone than I want if I'm trying to keep my image really clean and haze free. I particularly love changing it to the soft light blend mode. See, it's just a little bit more subtle, just some subtle warmth there, and retaining that that nice crisp look that I like. So that's what my toning layer looks like. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use another curves layer. Actually, you could do curves or levels here. It doesn't matter. I'll show you with levels since I haven't done that one yet. And I'm going to set this one to multiply. So in case you haven't noticed, I edit with blend modes a lot. They are so wonderful. So if you aren't familiar with them, I highly recommend playing around with them. They are lifesavers, and I use them in every single edit that I do. I almost always have layers in soft light or multiply. I'd say like 99.9% of the time. So anyway, I'm going to invert this layer mask because that looks terrible. And really the only thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to paint a little bit of darkness here on the sky. I've got my brush. Oh, I've got my black one selected, so I need to toggle that to the white brush so it will reveal everything here. And you don't have to worry about this little guy. I'm just going to clone him out anyway. So I'm going to do that. Well, actually, I'm going to start over there. I'm going to use a lighter opacity brush. I started with 100% and it was a little bit, I just feel it's going to leave me a dark line when I get too close to the building, so I'm going to go at maybe about 40% on this brush. Like I said, don't worry about that guy. We're going to get rid of him in a little bit. But I just want to darken the flag and multiply. What multiply does is it just kind of darkens and deepens the colors that are already there. So you can see there's just a little bit of blue, and it just kind of made the flag pop a little bit, which I love. And I just named that darkening. What I love to use this layer for in a normal client edit or personal edit is I will use a multiply layer to darken the background around my subject and just kind of let my subject pop a little bit more from the background. So that's another way to use a multiply layer. So that's all I'm going to do for with these adjustment layers. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up these shadows here. They're kind of dark in these archways and under the ceiling, and the ceiling was so beautiful. I really want to preserve that. So I'm going to do that by doing Command or Control J to duplicate my layer. And I'm going to come up here to Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to come up to Shadows and Highlights. You can lift the shadows with the Curves layer or a Levels layer. Sometimes though it becomes like it'll give you a matte look, and I'm not going for that in this image. I want it clean and classic, and I don't want anything hazy going on here. So I'm just going to use a Shadows and Highlights layer here. And you can see you've got a shadows box, a highlights box, and color adjustments here. I'm going to leave the highlights alone. I'm only going to be dealing with the shadows here. So these are the default values that they come to. You can see just watching underneath the ceiling, I'll adjust it as I go. Not really anything too really bright, and well, it makes the rest of the image flat, but it makes the ceiling look, like it's got more texture. So I want to keep it subtle. I want it to look natural, kind of like it looked to my eye, but I want it to be, I don't want it to be the star of the show necessarily. So I'm going to keep it probably at the defaults are fine. It was 35, so anywhere, 33, 35, same thing. And I'm just going to leave these alone and click OK. And I don't like the way it flattens out the rest of the image, so I'm going to add a layer mask here just by clicking that. And with Command or Control I, I'm going to invert that layer mask. And I'm going to come back in here with a brush set to 100% opacity. And I'm going to brush that shadow recovery onto the ceiling here. And you can see it really opens it up without making it too obvious. And you can see I've gone over a little bit, so I'm going to just with my / key, the one above the enter return button, just kind of refine my edge here, make sure I'm not spilling over too much. Oops, go back in with my black brush, kind of come up to the corners or the edges here and just make that nice and neat. All right, and I'm going to turn that off and come back down here to the railing. I don't want that to be too deep in the shadows. Just go like that, kind of bring those shadows up a little bit there, and maybe do a little bit here and bring those arches out. Again, I don't want it to be the star of the show, but I don't want those to look like, you know, giant black holes that then become distractions that would take away from the image. So I need to refine this one a little bit more. It looks like it's bleeding over a bit there. You can see where those lines meet. So that looks good to me, and so I'll go ahead and flatten it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image with I just hit my C key on my keyboard, and I'm going to crop it in just so I don't have to deal with that thing. I mean, I could clone it. It's not really a big deal. But I'm just going to crop it in a little bit and keep this flag more. I don't want it, if I left it down here, I don't know. I guess it's really subtle, not a huge difference, but I'm going to keep it up at the top. Oops. All right, so that wasn't quite enough. I can still see it lingering there. There we go. Pull it back up to the top. Oh my gosh. Okay, like 8th times the charm there. So I went ahead and cropped it, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clone out these signs over here with my patch tool. So I duplicated my layer there, and all I'm going to do is come with my patch tool here, and these aren't going to be the most seamless cloning jobs you've ever seen, but they're far enough away in the image that it doesn't really bother me. So I'm just going to leave it. I mean, if this were a close-up image, I would be much more careful with the way I'm doing it, just because the pattern of the bricks can give it away if you're up close. But again, we're not in this image, so I'll just make sure I've got those that column line lined up there, which I didn't. So I'm going to go back and try that again. And that history panel is a fantastic thing. All right, so you can see if you're up close, you could tell there was some cloning done there. You could tell it was done there. But when you zoom back out, it's really not anything that's going to catch your eye or even be noticeable. So it doesn't bother me. All right, so I'll flatten that. And then my last finishing touch that I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it, because as in Western cultures, as we read left to right is the same way we read an image. And I feel a little, you know, there are some cases when I would want this to go the opposite way of what feels natural. But in this one, I don't want to give any, I just want it to feel natural and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it. So image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. And there we go. So we come in on this leading line here, it curves us around, these vertical lines kind of push us up, and we've got the Spanish flag flying in the wind up there in the top corner, which to me makes for a pleasing visual experience. So this was my image from start to finish, and you can see I've got the other final product there. So you can see where we started. Kind of gray, kind of dreary, not a lot of punch in there, to where we finished with just a few minor adjustments to some adjustment layers and a little bit of shadow recovery on the ceiling. So I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.